North Jersey is heating up again. In the 12 months ending January 2026, some New Jersey towns saw home values jump by six figures. Deal alone added $412,280 to a typical home's price, landing at $4,212,865. That is not a blip. It's a pattern, and it's spreading along the commuter rail lines, across bedroom communities, and up the coast. Through 2025, demand in New Jersey held steady despite some of the nation's highest property taxes and some of its highest home values. The statewide median sales price across all property types rose 5.4% last year to $525,000. By early 2026, the map of price growth had a clear center of gravity: the New York Metro's Jersey side and the shore. Start with the extremes. In leafy Bergen County, Alpine's typical home value climbed to $2,955,120, up $321,208 in 1 year, an increase of 12.2%. In Bayhead on the ocean, the typical mark hit $2,362,175 after a $240,903 rise in the same period, a gain of 11.4%. Just up the coast in Lock Arbor, 1 year added $231,775 to bring the typical home to $2,880,432, an 8.8% bump. Inland in Saddle River, values rose $226,124 to $2,210,648, up 11.4%. Seagirt came in at $2,304,930 after a $211,955 climb, a 10.1% gain. These are not speculative outliers, they're the current price of entry in communities that anchor the region's commuter belt and second home corridor. Even the mid-tier of high-end towns clocked in with eye-widening numbers. Demarest rose $180,632 in 1 year to a typical $1,411,184, a 14.7% leap. Allenhurst added $176,971 to reach $2,218,522, up 8.7%. Franklin Lakes tacked on $157,124 to hit $1,517,266, up 11.6%. Harvey Cedars moved $151,054 higher to $2,112,184, up 7.7%. And Mantoloking rose $149,133 to $1,969,772, up 8.2%. The story is repeated across Essex, Union, and Morris counties. Short Hills to $2,258,188 after a $138,052 annual jump, up 6.5%. Englewood Cliffs to $1,690,452 after a $133,234 rise, up 8.6%. Spring Lake to $1,355,030 and $9 after a $130,210 surge, up 10.6%. Summit to $1,299,780, $7 after a $117,579 gain, up 9.9%, and Rumson to $2,126,098 after a $115,538 increase, up 5.7%. What happened? The return to office drumbeat, even part-time, is pulling households back within reach of Manhattan. Predictions for 2026 call for the New York City outskirts, a ring that includes northern New Jersey, Long Island, the Hudson Valley, and Fairfield County, to heat up as commuting relevance returns. That shift forms a new gravitational pull, people who still want space and sanity but need to be 1 or 2 trains from an office. And the pull isn't just jobs. Friction in big city life has some New Yorkers moving out, and New Jersey keeps checking boxes: schools, yards, neighborhood feel, and rail into Manhattan. Another force is interest rates and the way they trapped would-be sellers. Across New Jersey, the average mortgage rate held by homeowners hovered around 4%. Meanwhile, the market rate had stretched as high as 7.8% in the past couple of years. That gap froze inventory. Many owners who wanted to move did not want to give up a 4% mortgage to take out a new one near 7%. Predictions for 2026 to mortgage rates easing toward roughly 6.3% from about 6.8% in spring 2025. If that materializes, more on-the-fence sellers could list, and more buyers may jump in. But supply is not simply a function of rates. In New Jersey, a history of home rule and exclusionary zoning has kept a tight lid on new housing in many towns. Layer on a high regulatory environment that lengthens development timelines and raises costs, and you get chronic underbuilding. Even when homes are added, many are high-end. That mismatch shows up at closing tables. Buyers confront a limited supply at the price points they can afford, while the available inventory tends toward luxury. The result, a persistent affordability crisis. The median statewide price at $525,000 caps a year, where demand did not bend, and the gap between what buyers can pay and what exists remains, in one advocate's words, astronomical. The numbers tell you what today's pressure looks like on the ground. In commuter magnets like Montclair, the typical home reached $1,102,512 after a one-year increase of $68,186, up 6.6%. Westfield rose to $1,226,968 after a $77,572 jump, up 6.7%. Milburn's typical home hit $1,203,250 after an annual increase of $78,763, up 7.0%. Chatham reached $1,266,015 after a $101,726 surge, up 8.7%. Summit's $1,299,787 came with a $117,579 hike, up 9.9%. The zip codes differ, but the pattern is the same: strong demand meeting stubborn supply. The Shore tells a parallel story. Long Beach Township sits at $1,970,933 after an $82,236 one-year rise, up 4.4%. Beach Haven jumped $78,198 to $1,633,544, up 5.0%. Stone Harbor reached $2,477,217 after adding $95,422, up 4.0%. Barnegat Light moved to $1,581,993 after a $72,838 increase, up 4.8%. Point Pleasant Beach rose to $1,037,703 after a $72,953 gain, up 7.6%. Even smaller enclaves didn't escape the heat. Ship Bottom at $1,429,294 after a $96,115 jump, up 7.2%. And Interlaken at $1,505,655 after $102,970 more, up 7.3%. Look across the Bergen County ring, and the drumbeat continues. River Edge's typical home value of $811,599 climbed $69,621 in a year, up 9.4%. Wyckoff hit $1,091,109 after an $85,284 rise, up 8.5%. Palisades Park reached $961,033 after a $74,981 increase, up 8.5%. Glen Rock settled at $1,011,5 $530 after a $70,541 one-year jump, up 7.5%. Ridgewood rose to $1,161,944 with an $82,214 pop, up 7.6%. Ho-Ho Cuss reached $1,237,421 after adding $95,013, up 8.3%. Old Tappan climbed to $1,191,019 after a $69,148 rise, up 6.2%. Upper Saddle River landed at $1,373,140 after a $70,473 gain, up 5.4%. Howarth reached $1,139,860, up $106,944 in a year, 10.4% higher. Even South Jersey played along. In Haddonfield, the typical home hit $807,328 after a $62,505 one-year rise, up 8.4%. Margate City reached $1,056,909 after adding $72,558 in a year, up 7.4%. The growth is not confined to a single corridor. Now widen the lens to time, not just place. 5-year changes have been seismic in several pockets. Allenhurst's typical value is up $1,127,742 across 5 years, a 103.4% doubling plus. Lock Arbor added $1,387,939 in 5 years, up 93.0%. Deal added $2,007,740 in 5 years, up 91.0%. Margate City is up $485,190 in 5 years, an 84.9% gain. Seagirt added $1,012,689 across 5 years, up 78.4%. Long Beach Township added $803,155 in 5 years, up 68.8%. Stone Harbor added $891,662 in 5 years, up 56.2%. And Englewood Cliffs climbed $470,602 over 5 years, up 38.6%. That is structural, not cyclical change in the way buyers value proximity, lifestyle, and location. Amid the frenzy, the backdrop tells a different story. Nationally, the typical home value sat at $358,968 in January, just 0.2% higher than a year before. The Garden State's trajectory diverged because demand here refused to break, even as borrowing costs climbed. Affordability has taken the brunt. Watch how that plays out in lending. When buyers don't qualify for prime terms, some are steered to higher-cost mortgages. If an initial payment feels manageable and later adjusts up, the risk of delinquency rises. It's one reason advocates warn about subprime products in this climate. The stakes are real. The wrong match between borrower and loan in a market with a $525,000 median price can have consequences that echo in court filings and family budgets. So who benefits? Owners in hot zip codes and builders who can bring product to market, especially higher-end product, benefit from these dynamics. Yet builders are working through headwinds. Across New Jersey, the patchwork of local control and zoning stops or slows projects before they begin. A high regulatory burden adds time and cost, which in turn pushes investors and developers to the margins or into only the most profitable builds. Those profitable builds tend to be luxury. The modest starter home, the segment that makes a market breathable, becomes rare. One industry leader put the problem plainly: a simple supply-demand imbalance, embedded in policy and process. Meanwhile, signals suggest that out-of-state dynamics are pushing more buyers toward the Northeast. Markets predicted to cool include parts of Florida and Texas. Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Miami, San Antonio, Austin, pinned down by rising insurance costs and repeated natural disasters. When premiums rise sharply in coastal zip codes and storm risk keeps resetting the math, households that can move look for stable ground. Northern New Jersey, within commuting reach of Midtown and the financial district, is a logical landing zone for those recalibrations. Zoom out again to the broader economy that supports paychecks and prices. In January, industrial real estate across the country averaged in-place rents of $8.94 per square foot, a 5.1% year-over-year rise. The national vacancy rate reached 9.6%, up 160 basis points from January 2025. There were 355.7 million square feet of industrial space under construction, about a 1.7% expansion of national stock. And in a telling data point, nationwide industrial sales totaled $4.10 billion in January. Now plant a pin in New Jersey. Here, industrial transactions in January totaled $372 million, the largest year-to-date sales volume among major U.S. markets, ahead of Los Angeles at $356 million and the San Francisco Bay Area at $266 million. Rent growth locally in New Jersey's industrial market registered 4.3% year-over-year, just below the national average, and the development pipeline held at about 7.5 million square feet. That footprint, warehouses, logistics hubs, light manufacturing, matters to housing because it underwrites jobs and incomes. A region that leads the nation in industrial deal volume this early in the year is one with momentum in its real economy, not just its for-sale listings. The industrial landscape also points to a logistics story with housing ripples. Producer prices rose 0.5% in December, the biggest monthly jump in 5 months, for a 3.0% annual rise. The truck transportation component climbed 6% year-over-year in December, and it has risen 32% since February 2020. Those freight costs show up in your grocery bill and in a shipper's site selection. As trucking and transportation prices rise, companies chase efficiency, often by leasing last-mile facilities closer to where people live. That is the logic fueling rent growth in hubs like Philadelphia, where industrial in-place rents grew 6.8% year-over-year, and raising new lease premiums in markets across the Northeast. In Bridgeport, the spread between new leases and in-place leases registered $4.85 per square foot, the widest in the nation. Those trends frame a Northeast corridor, New Jersey squarely in the middle, where logistics demand stacks under residential demand. Global trade is another variable to watch. Proposed 100% tariffs on Chinese-made port cranes were postponed late last year, but port operators are wary, roughly 4 in 5 U.S. Port cranes are produced in China, and the biggest models take about 2 years to deliver. Uncertainty can disrupt upgrade plans at the very moment cargo channels are still normalizing. Add shifting conditions at the Panama Canal, through which roughly 40% of U.S. imports pass. A Panamanian Supreme Court ruling invalidated a long-held port concession, the government seized 2 terminals, and a new operator stepped in pending a fresh contract. Back in the U.S., a Supreme Court decision striking down unilateral Liberation Day tariffs took one tool off the table. The administration responded by moving to a 10% global tariff, later raised to 15%. All of that translates to uncertainty in the container flows that feed East Coast and Gulf ports, uncertainty that companies may answer with stockpiling, rerouting, or delaying commitments. For housing in New Jersey, this is not an abstract macro story. It's about goods moving through the Turnpike corridor, paychecks in port towns, and confidence in facility expansions that spill over into local housing demand. Back to buyers and sellers in the Garden State. The psychology of 2026 may hinge on whether mortgage rates ease toward that predicted mid-sixes level. If they do, households locked into a 4% mortgage might still hesitate, but some will take the leap to move up, downsize, or relocate closer to work. That would nudge more listings onto the market. Predictions for the year also point to a stronger spring home buying season as rates tick down from the 6.8% seen in spring 2025. But the same forecasts caution that sales could increase only slightly because many buyers will remain priced out or constrained by a slower labor market. Even so, the median U.S. home sale price is expected to rise about 1% year over year in 2026, a marginal gain by recent standards. Against that backdrop, New Jersey's premium markets, where one-year increases ran from roughly $60,000 to over $400,000, look like outliers of demand concentration. Look closely at the towns where those large gains landed because they signal who this market is rewarding right now. In Essex Fells, the typical home value stood at $1,409,218, up $114,603 in a year, an 8.9% lift. In South Orange, it was $1,036,999 after a $77,944 rise, up 8.1%. In Milburn's Short Hill section, $2,258,188 after $138,052 more, up 6.5%. In Ridgewood, $1,161,944 after $82,214, up 7.6%. In Westfield, $1,226,968 after $77,572, up 6.7%. In Glen Rock, $1,011,530 after $70,541, up 7.5%. In Chatham, $1,266,015 after $101,726, up 8.7%. These are classic commuter suburbs with quick access east. The price tags say their utility value, schools, transit, proximity, has reset higher. The coastlines show a different form of intensity. Ship bottom at $1,429,294, up $96,115, 7.2%. Beach Haven at $1,633,544, up $78,198, 5.0%. Long Beach Township at $1,970,933, up $82,236, 4.4%. Mantoloking at $1,969,772, up $149,133, 8.2%. Harvey Cedars at $2,112,184, up $151,054, 7.7%. Barnegat Light at $1,581,993, up $72,838, 4.8%. Spring Lake at $1,355,039, up $130,201, 10.6%. These markets combined vacation demand with second home utility, and their 5-year numbers, Long Beach Township topping an $803,155 increase, Spring Lake adding $533,668, reflect post-2020 shifts that have not unwound. Affordability remains the counterweight. Advocates describe a gap with no rational relationship between wages and the cost of buying. Even when buyers are creditworthy and armed with down payment assistance, the available properties at their price point can be out of reach. If they accept higher cost mortgages to bridge the gap, a later payment reset can push households into distress. That risk concentrates on the margins, but it is real enough to show up in foreclosure data when the cycle turns. The structure of New Jersey's market, high median prices, high taxes, limited lower-priced inventory, amplifies that vulnerability. On the selling side, many owners sat tight through 2025 because swapping a 4% mortgage for something near 7% was intolerable. If 2026 sees rates drift down into the low sixes, the math changes, but only a bit. A 2-point premium over the old note still stings. That suggests a slow thaw rather than a flood of new listings. The knock-on effect is simple. Competition remains. In a year where renters are expected to see 2 to 3% rent increases by late 2026, as apartment supply tapers off from the 2021-2002 surge, some priced-out buyers will keep renting longer, deepening demand in commuter-friendly rental submarkets. The industrial backbone, again, matters for those renters and for the buyers they'll become. New Jersey's leading $372 million industrial sales volume in January did not happen in a vacuum. Across the Northeast that month, vacancies generally stabilized instead of spiking. Boston's vacancy rose to 11.4% after a 130 basis point increase, Philadelphia's up 40 basis points, and Bridgeport's up just 30 basis points, with Bridgeport holding at a tight 4.5% vacancy, the tightest major market nationwide. This is what a high-demand corridor looks like: elevated rents, strong new lease premiums, and enough stability in occupancy to keep investors writing checks. Look west for a second. The Great Lakes Metro set, flagged to heat up alongside the New York outskirts, is already building hard on the industrial side. Columbus, Ohio had 12.2 million square feet under construction at the end of January, a projected 3.7% inventory expansion, the second largest increase among major U.S. markets. That's the kind of development curve that attracts logistics, tech, and advanced manufacturing tenants. For New Jersey households with employers tied into that Midwest-Northeast chain, the job picture props up housing demand even when borrowing costs bite. Back in the Garden State, the story is not just for the ultra-wealthy. Mid-high towns posted big movements, too. Oradell at $951,635 after a $61,646 one-year rise, up 6.9%. Haddonfield at $807,328 after $62,505, up 8.4%. Little Silver at $1,072,960 after $67,189, up 6.7%. Montclair at $1,102,512 after $68,186, up 6.6%. Glen Rock at $1,011,530 after $70,541, up 7.5%. Florham Park at $996,992 after $74,754, up 8.1%. Palisades Park at $961,003 after $74,981, up 8.5%. Gloucester at $1,119,740 after $78,487, up 7.5%. Westfield at $1,226,968 after $77,572, up 6.7%. South Orange at $1,036,999 after $77,944, up 8.1%. These are the zip codes where bidding wars write the script, not because money is cheap, but because inventory is scarce and location utility is high. For the ultra-high end, the 5-year trajectory is stunning. Deal's 5-year jump of $2,007,740 represents a 91.0% surge. Lock Arbor's 5-year move of $1,387,939 is 93.0%. Allenhurst's $1,127,742 rise is 103.4%. Seagert's $1,012,689 climb is 78.4%. Bayhead's 5-year gain of $896,644 is 62,001.2%. Short Hills added $828,873 in 5 years, up 58.0%. Long Beach Township added $803,155, up 68.8%. These figures reflect a reshaping of the top of the market since 2020 that has not reversed, even as national home price growth flattened to 0.2% year-over-year in January. Where does policy fit? In Trenton, leaders face a conundrum. Raising taxes to cover rising costs risks alienating residents and businesses. Cutting programs risks those who rely on them. Both choices ripple into housing through affordability and service levels. There's talk of making the development process more efficient, streamlining approvals, reducing timeline drag, to nudge more supply into the pipeline. There's also discussion of a state-level community reinvestment law modeled on the Federal Community Reinvestment Act to push banks to invest equitably in affordable housing where they take deposits. None of that turns a market overnight, but it hints at a policy track aimed at the structural pieces of the affordability puzzle. In the nearer term, the market message to buyers is blunt. If you're trying to purchase in North Jersey's commuter suburbs or on the shore, expect competition and be prepared to move fast when the right listing lands. If rates drift lower, you may get a touch more breathing room on monthly payments, but you may also face more bidders as those on the fence jump in. If you're renting, be ready for rents to rise 2 to 3% by late 2026, as the apartment surge of 2021-2022 ebbs and new deliveries slow. Signals suggest that the hot list of 2026 will include northern New Jersey, Long Island, the Hudson Valley, and Fairfield County, while some former Zoom towns further south see cooler demand. For sellers, the calculus is different. If you're holding a 4% mortgage and thinking about your next chapter, a 6 handle on the new rate might still hurt, but it can be manageable if you're trading equity from a home that is, for instance, $117,570 higher in Summit or $101,726 higher in Chatham than a year ago. That equity is the cushion that can bridge the rate gap. The decision comes down to life timing and the new monthly line item. Builders and developers are threading a needle. The path of least resistance still points to high-end product, because that's where the margins pencil in a high-cost, high-regulation environment. But the political wind is shifting toward affordability as a top-of-mind issue among voters. That opens the door for targeted reforms, say by-right zoning for missing middle housing in select corridors, or time-bound approvals, to trim costs and spur broader-based supply. For now, though, the structure stands. Slow, costly, and restrictive processes that translate into fewer units and higher prices. Even with those headwinds, New Jersey's market is resilient. Industry practitioners describe a strong, steady year ahead. That view rests on geography, between Philadelphia and New York, and on momentum. Single-family, adult community, and condo segments staying active. It also rests on the state's economic underpinnings. New Jersey leading with $372 in industrial sales in January is not just a bragging right, it's a signal of capital confidence in the places that underpin the region's goods movement and employment. Keep an eye on the micro markets within the macro. In Bergen County, Old Tappan at $1,191,900 after a $69,148 rise, 6.2%. Upper Saddle River at $1,373,140 after $70,473, 5.4%. Woodcliff Lake at $1,193,599 after $72,448, 6.5%. Mountain Lakes in Morris County at $1,162,670 after $70,024, 6.4%. River Edge at $811,599 after $69,621, 9.4%. Glen Rock at $1,011,530 after $70,541, 7.5%. These town-level data points are the fingerprints of a regional story. Look further down the list, and the pattern still holds. Florham Park at $996,992 after $74,754, 8.1%. Palisades Park at $961,033 after $74,981, 8.5%. Gloucester at $1,119,740 after $78,487, 7.5%. Westfield at $1,226,968 after $77,572, 6.7%. South Orange at $1,036,999 after $77,944, 8.1%. Beach Haven at $1,000,000 $633,544 after $78,198, 5.0%. Cape May Point at $1,474,306 after $78,638, 5.6%. Long Beach Township at $1,970,933 after $82,236, 4.4%. The rise is broad, not isolated. In this environment, some risk flags deserve attention. Watch lending standards. If affordability pushes more borrowers into higher-cost loans, late payment pressure can mount when introductory terms expire. That's the path that leads, months later, to a bump in foreclosure starts. Also, watch insurance conversations in competitor markets. When a family in Fort Lauderdale faces a premium spike and then weighs a move, they don't just pick any place. They pick where schools, commutes, and neighborhood fabric fit. Lately, northern New Jersey fits. So what's next? Base case for the next 12 months, northern New Jersey heats up relative to the rest of the country, with price growth concentrated in commuter suburbs and shore towns. Demand remains firm as people reposition around the hybrid office, and as some Sunbelt markets cool under insurance pressure, mortgage rates drifting toward the mid-sixes coax more listings to market, nudging transactions higher from 2025 levels, but not unleashing a wave. The statewide median price, which rose 5.4% to $525,000 last year, holds or edges up in 2026, given tight supply and durable demand, while U.S. prices rise about 1% year over year. The industrial base stays constructive, with New Jersey's early year $372 million sales lead translating to stable employment in logistics and warehousing along the Turnpike spine. Two watch items could bend that base case. First, the path of mortgage rates over spring and summer. If rates settle near 6.3% as predicted, you'll see a stronger spring buying season. If they bounce back toward the high sixes or higher, sideline sellers may retreat and buyers may stall. Second, the policy and logistics turbulence at ports and in trade. If tariff regimes and Panama Canal operations stay unsettled, supply chains could whipsaw, pulling forward stockpiling or pausing expansions. Either scenario would ricochet through New Jersey's industrial tenants and, by extension, local housing demand. Stretch a third thread to zoning and permitting reform. If municipalities open the spigot even a little, the market could see measured relief on inventory in 2026 and beyond. If not, scarcity will keep writing the script. Through it all, remember the ground truth of this market. Buyers still compete for a limited supply, and values in the places with the clearest utility, schools, transit, jobs, coast, keep rising. In towns like Deal, where a single year added $412,280 to reach $4,212,865, or Alpine, where $321,208 lifted values to $2,955,120, the numbers speak. Across commuter hubs like Chatham, Summit, Milburn, Westfield, and Montclair, where 1 year increases from roughly $68,000 to $117,000 pushed typical values into the million-plus range. The story is the same. The market is not chasing a trend, it is repricing a lifestyle. If you want more clear-eyed, numbers-first storytelling on where housing, insurance, and the broader economy are really moving, subscribe and stay with me.